Welcome to Art Books on Tape. Bert, who do we have this week?
Today we have Roger Steffens.
Roger.
He's a photographer guy.
And he did a book called The Family Acid. You can check it out on Instagram
Yeah, he
at
has
The
a good
Family
Instagram
Acid.
account.
Bunch of cool stuff. He's got some pretty crazy stories. Definitely stick around for
He's
this
awesome.
one. Yeah.
Oscar Janiger was a friend of mine. You know who that is? The original Dr. Oz.
Really?
He was an LSD researcher in 1951 at UCLA. He was like a much more responsible version on the West Coast of Timothy Leary back at Harvard.
So you want to try this or do you want to smoke flower?
I prefer flower because I might get too high with that.
No problem.
You'll definitely
Forget my
get
stories.
to that.
But Oscar Janiger gave acid to Cary Grant. He gave it to 100 artists. That would interest you, Bart.
Uh-huh.
And he had a big old Kachina doll, and he had each of the 100 artists do a picture of it in whatever their medium was. And then, as he said, I gave them the medicament. And in the middle of the trip, when they were just exploding,
Right.
he had them do it again.
Of course.
And then when they came down, and were totally straight again, he had them do it a third time.
Huh.
And one night he brought all 300 slides over to my house to show me, and
Whoa.
he said every one of the artists said they'd never see the world the same way again, and it was a
course.
totally positive experience.
I mean, how can you?
How can you?
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly.
Come on.
So, just want to welcome everybody to the show.
Are we recording
Yeah,
already?
we're recording. We're
Oh,
good.
cool.
Yeah.
Hi.
So, Roger, why don't you introduce yourself?
My name is Roger Steffens, and I'm 72 years of age. I'm the OG original.
Yes. That's the best.
I've been imbibing Ja Holy Herb since 1967 in Saigon when the Army sent me there, and I spent the last 26 months of the 60s in Vietnam, and enjoyed a smoke every day of the time I was there. And I've been a broadcaster since 1961. My first guest was Olatunji, the Nigerian drummer. Wow. And I was on KCRW, the NPR station here in Los Angeles, for 10 years. My first guest back in '79 on the reggae beat was Bob Marley. And he and Peter Tosh became really good friends. And I guess you could call me an herbal activist over the air. I've never made any secret on the air in either my television or radio shows or on stage when I MC concerts that I smoke herb. In fact, I inducted both Bob Marley and Peter Tosh as members of the Cannabis Hall of Fame for High Times magazine in Amsterdam.
Wow.
Oh yeah, the induction of Peter Tosh is on YouTube. It's kind of funny because they gave us 21 sativas and 64 indicas to judge in 4 days, and you know that's a challenge I rose to. But
it's also just
It's
drinking a lot of
impossible.
wine and stuff like that. You have something called palate fatigue.
yeah,
So it's how,
Right.
especially after smoking all
You
that, how
can.
can you even taste that?
you can't, absolutely not.
So you had to spread it out a little bit.
No. Hey, I went all the way to Amsterdam. I'm not going to spend hours coming down to see how good the next one is.
Yeah. Good
Yeah,
point.
there's no time.
You know? And so it was after 4 days and nights of judging that I did my induction speech for Peter, and that's the one that's up on YouTube.
Wow. And so how did that opportunity come to you?
Well, I had a magazine for 27 years called The Beat, which was originally the Reggae Beat, Reggae Mag, and then it expanded to World Music. And people in New York read it and asked me to write for High Times, which I did. And then when they started doing the Cannabis Cups in Amsterdam, they brought me over in '98 to induct Bob as the first member of the Cannabis Hall of Fame. And, the Amsterdam, Schiphol, or however you pronounce that airport, that's the saddest airport in the world.
right.
There's
Really?
so many
I've never
people
been.
with
Yeah,
tears
totally.
leaving their stashes behind.
Well, no, that's the train station too, though, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, the train station before you go to the airport.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so sad.
It's so sad. All that great herb you have to say
You
bye-bye
just
to.
could kind of hang out for a minute and just if you just got there, wait for somebody coming in, and you're just like, hey, they're like, here, take this. I want you to have
Yeah.
this.
That happened to me in Marrakesh.
Oh yeah.
I lectured against the war for a year when I got back home in the beginning of 1970, and at the end of the year, Nixon was still in office, and that bastard Kissinger still killing people in Vietnam by the tens of thousands. And I was just so ashamed to be an American. I didn't want to be an American anymore. So I moved to the Medina in Marrakesh. I learned I was an American.
Yeah.
And when I arrived in country, I was driving down from Tangier to Marrakesh. And just north of Casablanca, I saw this hippie hitchhiking. And he had a real sad look on his face. And I picked him up and I said, "Where are you going?" He says, "To the airport." And he spun this story. In the 60s, he used to see ads in Harper's and Atlantic for windjammer cruises around the world. And this kid had answered the ad, and they told him to meet him in Casablanca and that they would go on a 3-month round-the-world cruise. And he got there a couple of days early, and the captain of the ship says, "Well, why don't you go up to the Reef Mountains and score some hash and bring it back here for the trip?" So the guy says, "Yeah, that's a great idea." So he went up there, and I guess he bought a lot of hash, and came back to the dock, and there were about 6 or 7 other kids standing there, and the boat was gone. So the guy had taken all their money for the 3-month trip and just bounced.
Oh, man.
So the guy said, "I have some hash. Do you have any American money?" And I said, "I don't think so, but I might have a little." He says, "Well, look, I can't travel with this." He says, "So I don't know how much money you have, and you don't know how much hash I have, but
Just trade.
if you a straight trade, if that would be all right
What?
with you." And I said, "Sure." And I
I feel
took
like
out.
you might have gotten the better end of the deal.
Wait till you hear.
Yeah.
And I had $7 US.
What?
And he took off like a size 12 boot with a false pad in it, and he pulled out about 2 inches of hash that filled the entire sole of the boot, and the other boot with a similar amount. And I spent almost a year in Marrakesh and never ran out of hash.
What?
$7.
So
$7
have you ever seen these things?
Oh, and in Amsterdam, they had some that were like about 3.5 feet long.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, and
You just kind of
Here.
put your lips up against it.
Put your
Yeah.
lips here and go.
oh, I got you. Yeah.
Just. That's amazing.
Man,
Man, just that story alone is kind of amazing.
I mean,
And you have thousands of those, I bet.
I'm 72. I got a lot of stories.
so Roger, you came in here to talk to us a little bit about a book that you have just released. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Good hit.
May I?
Yeah, very nice. Pardon me, listeners. I hold in my hand the first book of photographs that I ever made, and it's called The Family Acid, so named by my daughter. This is the
Pardon me.
result of
Pardon me, sorry.
shooting 40,000 slides from the Tet Offensive in Saigon through about 1993,
Wow.
when I started shooting film. And my daughter says we are often called the Waltons on acid, our family. So about 2.5 years ago, my son Devin Marley decided to digitize 40,000 slides.
Jeez.
Spent a year doing it.
What?
And then our daughter Katie said, "Why don't we do an Instagram site?" And I said, "What's that?" I'm techno-igno. I don't even have a cell phone.
I am a large fan of. We'll have the Instagram site up on
Oh,
our
good.
site to show.
Oh, good. So she started posting 2 pictures a day, and last October we got discovered and went viral. Time Magazine did a story about us, and Slate and CNN, and then in December, The New Yorker asked me to take over their site for a week.
Really?
And we gained 3,200 followers that week. And then in January, the New York Times Sunday Style section did a spread.
Jeez, yeah, I
The same
think
day
about-
that
yeah.
The Guardian in England did a 2-page spread in their Sunday paper. And then the BBC did a World News Television report about us. And
Was this around Bicycle Day?
I don't know when or what is
I
Bicycle
forget.
Day.
Bicycle Day. Isn't Bicycle Day like the day that Albert Hoffman
Oh,
first?
Yeah, Bicycle Day.
First took
in 1938.
first took the ride on the bike.
I had him on my radio show on the 30th anniversary of that.
I mean, like that's iconic, right?
Yeah, my God, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
maybe it was just that energy.
it might have been.
Yeah.
It might have been. And a company called Sun Publishers in New York, Sun Books, a consortium of artists in New York City, found out that all of them were fans of the website. So we got a call from them asking if they could do a book of my photographs.
Amazing.
And within 3 months, I had a book. It arrived just in time for the MoCA LA Art Book Fair, because it was being printed in Boston in January, and they had to shut down the presses for 4 days because the ink in the presses froze.
Oh my God.
In Boston in January.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so it arrived just in time.
Wow.
And
That
then
makes no
Nick
sense.
and I met a few days ago at the Paris Photo LA fair exhibition at the Paramount Studios. And
You had your own little storefront.
I did. The printed matter people from New York were also fans of the Family Acid site, and they had a little space left, and they said, "Would you like to have it?"
Yeah.
That's amazing.
They
That's
saved us
great.
$12,000.
Yeah.
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 And we sold 68 books.
That's amazing.
There
Had
was-
amazing conversations the entire
Oh
time. I'm
God!
sure.
Oh, incredible! Met you.
Yeah.
And there were 8 pictures up. One of which was my dining room table in Berkeley in 1973 when I was living with Tim Page, the most wounded Vietnam correspondent, the guy that Dennis Hopper plays in Apocalypse Now.
Sure.
And the table was covered with big jars of jugs of wine and rolling papers and a huge bottle of seeds and a rolling tray and glasses and all kinds of stuff. And Drew Barrymore came in the booth and she says, "Oh, that looks like my childhood."
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
I mean that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So we've got a book, a hardcover book, beautifully printed, called The Family Acid, and I'm meeting with a major hotel chain on Monday who saw the pictures and want to talk to me about displaying my pictures in their hotel.
That's great.
That's
oh,
That's
I mean,
awesome.
it's insane what's been happening.
That's amazing.
I mean,
what's the
This
what's
is
the,
stuff sitting in a closet for 40 years, gathering
Yeah.
dust, you know?
I mean, that's what happens when you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's the
That's a
Joan
good-
Didion shot. It's
Can we describe
half
that
dozen.
photo a little
Yeah, you're
bit?
looking down from a balcony onto the edge of a swimming pool, which is turquoise blue, kind of Hockney-esque. But there's 6 people, one of whom is Richard Boyle. He worked with my first wife as a war correspondent in Vietnam for the same paper. And Richard Boyle is the guy that Oliver Stone made a movie about called Salvador. James Woods plays him in the movie. And then there's my first wife, Cynthia Koppel, who was a war correspondent I met on the island of the Coconut Monk, an island of 6,000 pacifists in the middle of the river who dropped out of the war. And she-
Everything that comes out of your mouth seems like a tangent for another brilliant 50-minute story.
Hey, I'm old, man.
More than just that, but yeah,
And
sure.
the fellow in the middle is Mark McCloskey. He was a senior in college when I was a freshman, and he gave a talk in 1960 called Catullus versus Gregory Corso, the ancient Roman poet versus the beatnik poet.
Oh wow.
And it changed my life, and I began reading poetry every chance I got, because I was trained as an actor all my life. And a poem is the best way to say things with words.
Yeah.
So
Agreed.
it ended up where I was doing a one-man show called Poetry for People Who Hate Poetry, composed solely of living American writers, Ferlinghetti, Corso, Brodigan, Andy E. Cummings. He was dead, but he was too good to ignore. And I did that on the road from 66 to 76 with the time out for time abroad. But I've driven about every major highway and minor highway in this country, in a different city each week, reading poetry in the
That's
schools.
awesome.
Yeah, so you have an adventure like that coming up
Yeah,
too,
I guess
don't
so. Yeah, that's awesome.
you? Yeah, I had places I had to be. You just
Right.
you
I'm
were.
just gonna be there because I want to be.
Tell folks about it.
Sure. I'm going to be signing my name across the U.S.
A map,
Virtually. What?
a map, right?
Well, yeah. I just took a map, wrote my name on it, and now I'm going to figure out what routes that is, so that as I drive, I spell my name out across the United States. So I'm virtually signing the U.S. as an artwork.
That is fantastic.
So it'll conceptually belong to me. As you know how the idea of the signature, how it
Yeah,
people claim things with it.
yeah.
So I love the idea that an immigrant a child of immigrant families is now like going to sign the United States as
That's
his work.
such a cool idea.
Are you going to do an edition?
In addition, yeah, I'll sign different countries. You know, go to Africa, sign that. That might be a little rude and weird, but you know, maybe they'll let me.
Edition of one.
Yeah.
Artist proof.
Hardest proof. Anyway, what is the Instagram account so these people can follow it?
Instagram.com, the family acid.
Oh, it's just the family
Yeah,
acid.
slash
one
the
word.
family acid as
Gotcha.
one word, yeah.
Cool.
We just turned 20,000 followers this weekend.
That's great.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think the Paris Art Fair
I
brought us
love-
another 300 or
I love the idea that specifically this like moment in time that you are such a central part of, and it's such an experimental time in terms of so many things, is now an Instagram account that these kids who have like there's this sort of sense of loss in culture these days, you know.
Yeah,
but
I hear
the
that
fact
from a
that
lot of young people.
but the fact that you're using that tool to sort of create an awareness of this thing that is so valuable to all, like, what's the word I'm looking for? Not growth, but like a coming of age for these kids, because most of the kids that are on those things are like,
Well, it's funny
at
because
that-
a lot of times we get a comment because we put them, whenever it's possible, put the month and year of the pictures.
Right. Yes.
And
Brilliant.
People, oh, that's the month and year I was born.
Yeah, man.
I see that a lot.
of course.
Yeah.
Even-
And
I mean-
also, you know, we don't often see old people on Instagram. Like we've had that comment too. It's not just somebody's dinner and who they hung out with last
Yeah.
night.
Exactly.
But it's
exactly.
interesting in terms of what, I mean, Bert, I guess what you're saying is the
Oh,
sense
thank
of
you.
like, you know, these younger people, younger adolescents are going into adulthood and coming into a consciousness.
Yeah.
And how do they think about the world? And,
Right.
you know, to then understand this culture and that, you know, this wasn't part of humanity. I mean, I guess this was part of humanity
No, this
hundreds
is.
of years before. This is actually fundamentally humanity. You had the shamans,
Yeah.
you had these people, you know, leading people through these cultures.
Well,
And
yeah.
this is this new version, you know, synthetic or not. I
Right.
mean, in a lot of ways.
This was like, this moment was sort of like if you treat all of human culture as one person coming of age, this was one of those moments where all, like mankind, all of culture was coming of age as a whole.
Yeah.
Like
organism.
monotheism. or
Best
something
work
like
of the
that.
best artists.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
You know what's so sad for me and people of my generation, the original hippies. We really thought 65, 66 especially, early 67, that the millennium had come, that this is what everybody was dreaming
Right.
that the world would turn into. And oh my God, what a life we're going to have. And look, everybody's letting their freak flags fly. There's color in clothing. Even Walter Cronkite would have a wild tie with wide
Yeah.
lapels on the CBS News. And it was permeating everything, and we underestimated so grossly the power of the enemy.
Yeah.
We just thought that we had it made. We were all going to live in communes.
But is there also like, you know, just a constant ebb and flow of parents in adulthood, right? If your parent, I know I have a lot of friends whose parents crazy hippies, and they're like some of the most straight-laced
Yep.
people ever, because they're like, I mean, you know, you just have, if you grow up in this thing, you just automatically rebel.
My son said, the only thing I hated about growing up with you guys was you didn't give me anything to rebel against.
Yeah, right.
It's true. Yeah.
But I mean, but that's an interesting thing, right? In terms of, you know, the yin to the yang, right? It is that always that battle, and there's always going to be this conservative and liberal and you know, it's like,
Yeah.
where can they
Yeah.
live together and where can they exist
Well,
together?
what's interesting, I think, that happens over time, it's like a pendulum, you know? There's one end, there's one extreme, and there's the other extreme. But over time, as the pendulum keeps swinging back and forth, like it never goes back completely to that extreme. The extremes keep getting smaller. So,
Yeah.
you know, in the next 100 years or so, what you guys started at one end, which has gone clearly gone to the other end,
Yeah.
is now on its way back. Like it's never going to be as bad as it was, and
It's the yin yang.
exactly. It's all
And
part of like the same.
My Jamaican
journey.
brethren say 1 step forward, 2 steps back.
Exactly.
Yep.
You know?
That's awesome.
But the yin yang again, that comes into play very heavily in my life, because in January of '69, during my second year in Vietnam, I was taken to this extraordinary island in the middle of the Mekong by John Steinbeck IV, the author's son, and Sean Flynn, Errol Flynn's son, who was a CBS cameraman who was lost the next year in Cambodia.
Wow.
And it was an island, it was a sandbar about a mile long and maybe 100 or so feet at its widest. And there were about 6,000 dropouts from both sides in the Vietnam War, North Vietnamese Communist Army, South Vietnamese Army, and a couple of thousand Taoists. And they were led by a 4.5-foot tall hunchback monk who hadn't lain down in 20 years. He slept sitting up in the lotus position, called the coconut monk. And he used to live like a flagpole sitter on a perch in a coconut palm tree. And eventually a wealthy Chinese benefactor in Saigon gave him this island. And he moved there with his followers, and more people. Anybody who came to the island, as one does, anybody who came to the island without a weapon was welcome, no questions asked. And they would build a straw house for them, and everybody would get together. And every 3 hours, both day and night, each family on the island would send one representative to the prayer platform at the end, which was this huge circular platform. And everything on the island had a double or triple symbolic meaning. And the platform had 9 columns, and 9 is the mystic number, the Trinity times itself, but it's also the Mekong, which is the river of 9 dragons, because it has 9 tributaries. And each of the columns was surrounded by a swirling yellow dragon, and on top with a lotus blossom. And then on one of them, there was this gigantic, maybe 25, 30-foot tall metal cutout. And on one side was Jesus shaking hands with Buddha.
Wow.
And on the back was Kuan Yin hugging the Virgin Mary. And the coconut monk wanted a peace conference to be held there. If all the different parties to the problem in Vietnam would meet with him for a week, he guaranteed he could bring peace. And if not, he'd throw himself into the Mekong and
Seems
die.
reasonable.
Yeah. And that's where I met my first wife, in combat boots and jungle fatigues.
So has anybody ever tried to buy that story from you and turn it into a movie?
Yeah, it seems like you have literally 1,000 movies.
It's the great untold story of Vietnam. In fact, Sun wants that to be my next book, because I've shot probably about 1,200 pictures in there. And at the back of the book, just before the captions to the pictures, which are little Brodigan-esque anecdotes I wrote about each picture, there's a picture of me and Cynthia, my first wife, on my third trip to the island. And I'm having a slideshow for the inhabitants of the island. They hung a huge sheet between 2 of the columns, and even the monk came out. Everybody came out to watch it. And there's a picture in my book where you see these kids who are seeing themselves for the first time in their lives.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Just, beaming up at the screen.
Wow.
And the most unique slideshow of my life.
That's amazing. I mean, so in taking those pictures, what was the intent? Was it just to
Just
capture
to document something that I felt was of historic importance.
Sure.
I've always had a keen sense of history because of my family. My grandfather graduated in history from the University of Dublin at the turn of the last century. And my mother was very interested in current events and in Egyptology, because she grew up at the time they were opening King Tut's tomb. And
Sure.
she had all the newspapers from that period when they were, each day they would send telegraphic reports to the States, and she kept all those papers. So I was reading those when I was like 5 or 6 years old. And I remember
being aware of documentation,
Yeah.
aware of all these things and how important it was
Yeah.
to be able to transfer this information. It was amazing, yeah.
And of course, being sent to Vietnam, I knew I was going to be in the middle of history. And I was there for 3 months when the Tet Offensive broke out.
Of course, yeah. And then,
Oh, hold that picture up to the microphone so
Okay,
people
yeah.
can see it better, Bert. There's a little pond with a sign that says, "Danger, invisible piranha." And on the left now, that's appropriate. It's one of the few double trucks in the book. That's Bill Cardozo, the man who invented the term gonzo.
oh, wow.
And he was a precocious 23-year-old editor of the Boston Globe Sunday magazine in the 60s when
Oh.
he had this young kid starting to write for him, Hunter S. Thompson. And he says, "Hey, man, this stuff you're
Who
writing."
is that? I haven't heard of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, some podcast.
Yeah.
He said, "Man, this stuff you're writing, Hunter, this is gonzo," but he spelled it Gonzeaux. It was a French-Canadian
What?
slang word for shining path.
I like
and that's the
that.
derivation. And he's quoted in all the books as being the founder. You know, Hunter always acknowledged him as coining the term gonzo. Hunter used to come over to the apartment I had in Berkeley
course
with
he did.
Tim Page with sheets of blotter acid with pictures of Nixon on them. I never could bring myself to take them.
Really? You never took
no,
it?
No, drop Nixon? No,
Yeah,
thank
that's
you.
No, it was-
weird,
it
man.
was-
The suggestion would have been
Yeah.
too malevolent.
Even just
man.
hearing those two words together.
I don't know. I feel
Drop
like
Nixon.
you could have like you could have possibly sent him some sort of psychic energy at that point or something like that.
He was hopeless.
Yeah,
He still
yeah.
hadn't resigned at that
I think
point.
he was beyond
Most despicable crook we've ever uncovered in the office.
uncovered.
Yeah. You can't not be a crook and get to that office.
Yeah, of course.
So, but wait, invisible piranha.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, what
It's full of them, don't you see?
I did. I did.
yeah.
I do see them.
I'm a little afraid of most bodies of water now.
They're
Yeah,
everywhere.
Me too. Yeah. Even the bathtub has its perils.
Absolutely. So, where can our listeners get this book?
On the website, there is a direct link to Sun Publishing. So Instagram.com/thefamilyacid, and that will take you to the book. Or you can go to our homepage through the website and order it directly from there. And it's almost sold out.
That's
so
awesome.
act now.
Act now, yeah, no, absolutely.
Our lines are open. Act now.
Yeah.
And then having uncovered this trove of imagery, now it seems like this is kind of the tip of the iceberg, or could be the tip of the iceberg in terms of putting together a lot more content.
Well, Sun is
finding the
talking
stuff.
about doing 10 books. We have a Hollywood production company that contacted us, wants
Yeah,
to
that
do
makes
a
sense.
film about
Of
us.
course.
Of course, yeah.
I mean, that's all going to happen.
Yeah.
I hope I live long enough.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah, you'll be fine.
It'll be good.
Just drop some Nixon.
Yeah.
Well, we did 2 years ago on my 71st birthday, June 17th, my wife and I dropped.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because
And
we
that
met
was-
on an acid trip in a pygmy forest in Mendocino under a total eclipse of the moon, so it was a good way to celebrate the
Yeah.
38th
Like one
anniversary.
does.
As one does.
As one does. And so that was the last time you have participated.
In acid?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I've still got a couple of tabs sitting there.
Sure. I mean, and I guess that's a good thing to, kind of tell our guests, it's more of an experiential thing. It's not something that's happening all the time, but it's these great experiences, and it was amazing that you got to record this and actually, live that and see that now and get to relive those memories.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone. I saw some terrible things happen
Sure.
Yeah,
to
I
people
can
who
imagine.
should not have ever taken it. And Tim always said, set and setting.
Yeah.
That was most important. You had to be in a comfortable surround, and you had to have somebody with you. You had to have a ground man with you. In fact, we told our kids to be near the phone the day we dropped. We dropped about 11:30 in the morning in our house in Echo Park in L.A. And so about 3:30 in the afternoon, a package came through the door from the mailman. So I put my clothes back on and I went upstairs, and it was from my friend Dr. Dredd, whose real name is Gary Himmelfarb, but goes by the handle Dr. Dredd.
Sure.
And he founded the Ross record label back in the early 80s in Washington, one of the great reggae labels. And he had been telling me for 7 years that he was going to make a theremin in dub record.
Okay.
And he had some incredible
Yes.
people on his label. He had Sly and Robbie with Dylan. He is the only person in history allowed to remix a Dylan song,
Wow.
I and I. And Israel Vibration, Culture, all kinds of great art, Don Carlos. So he took dubs from all of those artists, including the Dylan track, and he bought one of the 6 known copies of the original 1928 theremin.
Really?
And made this record called Theremin and Dub. And I was looking at psychedelic slides I'd taken, and that arrived in the middle of that. So we looked at the slides, and we played the Theremin and Dub, and it was just one of the greatest trips of my life.
Man.
Wow. That sounds phenomenal. I mean, and it's great that,
And that's like a Tuesday for you.
Yeah, it's great that
Yeah,
you're
I
still
think it was a
having
Tuesday.
Yeah, of course.
Oh, so to finish the story, about 10:30 at night, I call my daughter,
right.
and I go, Kate, Dad, you okay? Kate, your mother and I are in jail. And she lets out this scream, and I just started to laugh, and she got so mad at me.
But how
But
can
she
you
was
not?
ready to believe.
How can you not do that though? I mean,
know.
Yes, how can you not do that
it's
to your
so
children?
ready, you know. I would, yeah, I would have to.
I love that. I love that she believed you.
Yeah.
After
Oh, well,
everything you've done,
She grew up in my house.
that's hilarious. I love it.
Oh man. Well,
How old are your kids now?
Katie will be 36 in July, and our son Devin is 32.
Crazy.
awesome.
And he's a musician, God help him. That's the coconut monk.
Oh, that's him? I was going to ask you about that guy.
wow.
That's the coconut monk.
Yeah.
He is a cutie.
I'll hold it up to the mic here so you
Oh,
see
yeah,
him better.
please.
Yeah, he was a cutie. Yeah, 4.5 feet tall. And that's the slideshow at the Coconut Monks Island.
So
Oh,
what
yeah.
happened to the Coconut Monks Island?
He got, this is interesting. He got
That's
put in
amazing.
prison as soon as the commies took over in 75, and he died under house arrest in 91. Never got to practice or have followers again. And I talked to someone who went back. I've never been back, but a friend of mine went back recently, and he said, there is a bridge over the Mekong River with an off-ramp to the Coconut Monks Island. I don't know where
Really?
they found any place wide enough to even make an off-ramp. Yeah.
They probably like added. The island's probably like 4 times bigger. They just like put a bunch of dirt down
Who
there.
knows, you know?
Yeah.
But when I was there, the north bank of the river was controlled by the Americans and the south bank by the communists, and they fire rockets and mortars over the island,
Really?
but never touched the island.
Wow.
Why? And I would imagine you
They-
were or weren't hallucinating while this.
I
was
felt I
happening.
was because we did drop there. Remind me of that. They prayed to Christ, Buddha, Muhammad, Lao Tse, Confucius, Sun Yat-sen, Victor Hugo, and Winston Churchill.
No wonder
course.
there were so many prayer platforms.
Yeah.
And you were going to remind me of something. Oh,
Dropping on the Coconut
yes,
Island.
they had a double bell tower with these 6-ton bells made from melted down American mortar shells.
What?
And Johnny Steinbeck and I would lie underneath them and drop acid. And they were hit with tree trunks, and they were wow, 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 wow. And you hear them 5-6 miles up and down the river, and we were lying
Wait, you were
right
directly
beneath them
underneath them?
on acid.
Oh man.
It gave a
Jeez.
little extra edge to it.
Of course.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Just a slight edge.
Well, have you been to the? I mean, it reminds me of the only possible thing I could imagine that would be similar to that would be the Integratron out in the desert.
No, I've planned to go. My daughter went. She loved it.
Oh, it's great. The sound baths that they do. I mean,
Yeah.
your experience is a little bit more authentic, but
I think that's authentic.
yeah, no, but I mean that sounds.
I have to
amazing.
go out there.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
It's an amazing part of the world. Wow. All right. So, I mean,
Are we done? What's
I
going on?
don't know. I think.
I mean,
we're-
I feel like we could just talk
I could just
for
talk
days.
for hours,
literally,
and days, literally.
I'll tell you a Peter Tosh herb story.
Okay.
Perfect. Let's
yes.
do this. Yeah.
Take us
There's
out
a
with it.
picture in my book that some people have compared to a Matisse painting because it's all jumble of colors and flowers in the Sunset Marquis Hotel in Hollywood, just off the Strip, where a lot of the people used to stay. And Peter had a marvelous publicist who also worked for Bob. His name was Charlie Comer. Charlie Comer was a bulbous-nosed ex-alcoholic Irishman from Liverpool who had worked for Brian Epstein before Epstein found the Beatles. And Charlie was in the helicopter going into Shea Stadium with the Beatles. And he was like a Dutch uncle. He was my mentor. And in September of 79, he called me and he says, Roger, Peter's in your town. And he's got no herb. Can you help him? And I said, well, Charlie, as a matter of fact, I've just returned from a plantation of a friend of mine's in the mountains in Santa Cruz, and he grew a whole heap of 16-foot plants, and he gave me 2 colas. And they were like almost 2 feet long and as
Jeez.
round as a grapefruit. I
Yeah.
mean, 5
The size of
grand
your-
worth
basically
today.
like the size of your
bigger than your
forearm.
arm.
Yeah.
Bigger than that. Schwarzenegger's. Maybe.
Yeah.
And so he gave me the hotel room number and said he'd call Peter. So Mary my wife wrapped it up in a beautiful wrapping paper and put a red, gold, and green ribbon around it. And we go off to the Sunset Marquis and knock on the door. And he's got a chain on the door. So he opens the door a crack. And I'm standing there with this thing in 2 hands. You know, it's huge.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, what that? I said, well, it's a gift to you, Bush Doctor, from all the herbalists in California. So he lets go of the chain, grabs him, pulls me in, grabs Mary, pulls her in, slams the door, puts the chain back on, all in about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Right, right.
And he rips open the paper and he sees what it is. So he takes all the paper off, undoes the ribbon, he holds it in his hand, looks at it, breaks a piece off and smells it, looks down the barrel of it. Then he holds it out in his two hands and looks at me and he says, "Shaw, take a whole lot more than this to get my propeller spin."
Oh, man.
What?
But he didn't give it back.
Yeah, of course.
Peter
He was just letting you know. He was like, look, I'm not impressed.
Yeah,
But thank
yeah,
you.
But,
Yeah.
he was, yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, he was the funniest person, and very few people even believe me when I say that, because in the interviews he was always pissed off about something. He hated
Sure.
the record
Yeah, yeah.
companies, was mad at Babylon, didn't think American blacks knew their own culture. And he was always angry, but when the camera went off and he took the darkers, the shades that he had off, you could see the twinkle in his eye. The voice was deep, but the laughter was in the eyes. And he called his manager his damager.
Wow.
His producer was his reducer. He said he played in L.A., in Follywood. He said he played in San Francisco, California, United States of Asatica, because there's nothing merry about America, it's Asatica.
Yeah.
And he called the Queen of England, Queen Earlies, a bitch. And the crime minister who shit in the house of Represent the Thief.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just
The judge was the grudge.
I mean, it would also just be amazing, like, all the iterations that got him to those things as well.
Yeah.
You know, like, in between, like, starting from that to that. It's like, how, you know, what is that process? It's beautiful.
Yeah. Vatican shitty. Germs many. Taiwan and Taitu.
Yeah. Just happening naturally in conversation.
Boo York.
Boo York.
That's great.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much, Roger,
Yeah,
for coming
thank you.
on. This was
awesome.
Bert,
phenomenal,
thank you.
informative, and exciting. And we'll have the link to your book
Good.
and to the Instagram all on the page of This Is Not a Pipe. You guys can all check it out there. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure to be with you. Keep smoking, everybody.
Yeah.
One love.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
So that was cool.
That was pretty amazing. The coconut monk, I think, was my favorite.
Yeah, that was pretty hilarious. The picture of him was really cute.
Yeah,
a
it was.
good
He was
photo.
pretty adorable.
I like him. Anyway, Roger Steffens, everybody, check him out.
At The Family Acid, we have the link to the book. Once again, brought to you by This Is Not a Pipe, recorded at Green Street Studios. Thanks, everybody, for listening. See you guys next time.
See you guys next
Hear
week.
you guys next time.